So this week we read an article giving us a brief history of Russia, and I want to focus on the time before the Romanovs, before Ivan the Great, and look at Russia before it existed as a country, really. I want to look at the beginning. The article recounts that in the 9th century, as part of the same great movement that brought the Danes to England and the Norsemen to Western Europe, a Scandinavian people known as the Varangians crossed the Baltic Sea and landed in Eastern Europe. There was a great movement that brought the Danes to England and Norsemen to... Why is this the first time I've heard this? This is the origin story of how a bunch of civilizations began and developed, and isn't this a rather necessary part of the world history to know? I've been in this class for several months now, and I'm constantly realizing that what I'm learning about actually has a lot to do with the world history I've been learning for the past couple of years, and would have done a lot to fill in the blanks. Events that I'm only learning about just now, looking back, have such a great impact on the way I could have seen things that I learned about European history or American history. And this has been such an eye-opener. I'm really wondering why this wasn't considered essential to our understanding of world history, to have all these different perspectives. Because I'm understanding why things happened in such a new and more full way. Anyway, the leader of the Varangians was supposedly this guy Rurik, who is supposed to be this hero who either conquered or was allowed to rule the city of Novgorod, which became a really important city for the Varangian people. It makes me think a lot about hero figures, legendary figures, how we don't really know a lot of the details of his life or his actions, and how all of these different cultures that we're learning about seem to have this legendary figure in the past, some warrior who led the people and has great tales told about him. And I'm wondering what that says about different cultures and how all those stories are connected. Later on, Rurik's successor gained control of Kiev, which became the center of a trade route between Scandinavia and Constantinople. This I found interesting because I'm always hearing vague mentions of the connections between, Northern Europe and Southern Europe back in this time, before the Middle Ages, and I don't usually hear more than vague mentions. We don't really learn about it that much, and I wasn't really aware of the specifics and how that ties into the world history we know. I hear references to the Vikings or to the Romans having been in England and what influence they've had there and how they really affected modern England today and the architecture and the small towns and the culture there. And from what I've heard, there seem to be a lot of myths and legends that originate from this era, but we don't really learn about it, which I find interesting. The article then describes the invasion of the Mongols and how princes of different cities were required to send taxes to the Empire of the Golden Horde. And then it says, for the next century, very little happened in Russia. What does that mean that nothing happened? Something was clearly happening. I mean, probably nothing that would be that important from a historian's perspective, maybe, but you have to think that the details and the little events of daily life would build up to cause whatever happened next. Huge conflicts don't just arise out of nothing. Things happen to cause them, and so when you have these periods of quiet that historians describe as maybe not really worthy of noting, or they don't really record anything that happens, it makes me curious about what actually did. It makes me want to investigate it further because I want to see what chain of events led to those huge outbreaks of conflict later that seem to come out of nowhere. Because I don't really believe they come out of nowhere, and I don't think it's possible that they do. Things happen to cause other things. And that's what leads to, when we look at events like World War I, for example, everyone assumes that it was the assassination that caused it, but really it was just a chain of other small events during that. And I think it's a mistake anywhere in anyone's books to say that nothing actually happened. And that's my last observation. Thank you, Mr. Lennox. If all goes well, I'll see you next week.